You talk to yourself when nobody's around. You might whisper your thoughts while cooking, rehearse conversations in an empty room, or even argue with an invisible audience. And at some point, you've probably wondered if this means something is wrong with you. Most people do. They notice it in these private moments and feel a quick flash of embarrassment, even when they're completely alone. Society has quietly taught us that silence is normal, and talking to yourself means something is broken. But what if the opposite is true? What if that voice you hear in solitude isn't a flaw, but a signal? A signal that your mind just works a little differently. This habit often starts early. A child narrates their actions while playing, and an adult tells them to stop. Be quiet. Think inside your head. Over time, many learn to mute that internal voice, but others don't. They carry it right into adulthood, and you might be one of them. When stress rises, the voice gets clearer. When decisions feel heavy, it speaks up again. The psychology of people who talk to themselves when they're alone is rarely discussed honestly. It's often misunderstood. Some think it signals loneliness, while others believe it points to instability. But research tells a much more complex story. Self-talk can be a powerful tool. It can guide your focus, regulate your emotions, and even protect your sense of self. But there's a side to it that nobody ever warns you about, because not all self-talk is helpful. Some of it quietly shapes how you see yourself, and once you notice how it works, you can't unhear it. The real question isn't why you talk to yourself, it's who is really speaking back, and what has that voice been teaching you all along. As life gets louder, the inner voice often becomes sharper. Bills arrive, expectations grow, time feels like it's shrinking. In those moments, people who talk to themselves use language to anchor their reality. They label feelings, they replay events, they prepare responses. From the outside, it might look strange, but inside, it feels stabilizing. Psychologists have long known that verbalizing your thoughts helps the brain organize chaos. You create order by speaking it aloud, but the conflict appears when the tone of that voice changes. Some people speak to themselves with patience, others speak with cruelty. They repeat their failures, predict rejection, and criticize themselves before anyone else can. This is where the habit turns heavy. The same mechanism that helps you cope can also become a trap. You might notice yourself arguing with yourself late at night, replaying moments you can't fix, trying to win imaginary debates. So ask yourself this: does your inner voice sound more like a coach or a judge? Many people never ask. They just assume the voice is telling the truth. Over time, this shapes your confidence, affects your sleep, and quietly influences every decision you make. The psychology of people who talk to themselves reveals a clear divide. Those who guide themselves with their words gain clarity. Those who attack themselves gain anxiety. The biggest obstacle is awareness. You can't change a pattern you don't even notice. If any of this sounds familiar, subscribe. Now, we're going to dive deeper into understanding these patterns and what most people never explain. Here's the twist most people miss. Talking to yourself isn't really about being alone. It's about how connected you are to your own internal world. Studies show that people who use self-directed speech often score higher in problem solving and emotional insight. They externalize their thoughts to examine them. It's like stepping outside your feelings to get a better look. This is incredibly powerful, but only when it's done intentionally. When self-talk runs on autopilot, it just becomes noise. But when you guide it, it becomes insight. Think about athletes who talk themselves through a training session, or performers rehearsing their lines. They aren't unstable, they're refining their awareness. The same thing applies in daily life. You might say to yourself, calm down, focus, breathe. Those simple words activate regulation systems in your brain. But here's the danger: if your inner voice learned fear early on, it will repeat fear later. Trauma shapes our language. Past criticism becomes our future narration. This is why some people feel completely exhausted after a day of just thinking. They're carrying two roles, the speaker and the listener. True growth happens when the speaker becomes intentional. When you choose your tone, question your assumptions, and interrupt the negative spirals. Notice how your voice reacts under pressure. Does it rush? Does it blame? Or does it pause? This awareness changes everything. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring how the mind speaks when nobody else is listening. So let's go back to that moment you whispered a thought and felt strange about it. Nothing was wrong with you. You were processing. You were regulating. You were trying to make sense of the world. The voice you hear when you're alone is not an enemy. It's a reflection. It shows you how you learn to survive. When you treat it with curiosity, it can become your guide. But when it's left unchecked, it becomes your biggest critic. You have more influence here than you think. You can slow that voice down. You can change its words. You can learn to speak to yourself the way you wish others had. The psychology of talking to yourself ultimately points to one truth. The relationship you have with that inner voice is what shapes your peace. Tonight, when the room is quiet, listen closely. Notice the language. Notice the tone. Then ask yourself one question. Is this how I would speak to someone I truly care about? If the answer is no, you have the power to start again. Subscribe for more explorations into human behavior and the quiet patterns that shape your life. And tell me in the comments, when you talk to yourself, what does your inner voice usually sound like?